Welcome to another episode of the brand called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior and respected leader from the world of startups, private equity, and investments from Gurgaon, India, Vandana Tolani. Vandana, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here, and it's a great privilege to be on your show.
Thank you. Vandana is the founder and chief executive officer of Convanto, which is one of the most influential figures in India's startup and investment ecosystem. She's been awarded, recognized, and felicitated several times. So, Vandana, before we talk about Convanto, a few questions for you. Tell me about your journey and what was the inspiration to return to India and start Convanto?
Convanto was born from a mix of experience and emotion. I had spent years in Southeast Asia, helping with cross-border deals and meeting some incredible Indian founders abroad.
Mm.
They were full of passion and great ideas, talent or creativity, and many didn't know how to pitch to investors,
Mm.
structure their pitch or structure their business or scale globally. And, that really stayed with me.
Mm.
Indian startup scene had so much more energy, but lacked bridges, real guidance, connecting with the right investors, with the right founders. And that's what actually pushed me to come back and start Convanto, which
Mm.
actually now stands for Consultant Vandana Tolani.
Okay.
That's the full form of Convanto. And the idea was simple, like help startups become truly, investment ready and connect them to the right capital.
Mm.
Now, today Convanto works across sectors from edtech, fintech, agri-tech, consumer tech, health tech, D2C brands, and we have, raised for 400 companies in 45 countries
Wow.
till now, and we have helped five VC funds with fundraisers, and this was all within a span of 12 years. And we are connected with 400 plus global investors. These are all the MDs of the funds.
Mm.
For me, Convanto is more of giving back and bringing the global structure
Mm.
and mentorship that I had seen abroad, to Indian entrepreneurs.
Hmm.
Every time a founder we work
Hmm.
with scales or gets funded, it reminds me exactly why I came back.
Amazing, amazing. And tell me, when people move back, and you, of course, came back and set up Convanto, what have been some of the most challenging moments in building Convanto, and how did you navigate these?
So there have been plenty of challenges.
I'm sure.
And the first big challenge was building trust. When I came back, advisory services for startups were still very new in India.
Hmm.
And founders weren't sure if someone external could really add value.
Hmm.
And investors were hesitant about, uh, you know, intermediaries like, people connecting the investors and startups.
Hmm.
And Convanto was a new model, so getting both sides to believe it took patience.
Hmm.
And scaling globally while staying local was another test.
Hmm.
So every region, whether it is Singapore or the Middle East or Canada, has its own culture and investment mindset. But we had to face the bandwidth was a huge challenge. We were a small team managing multiple startups from preparing pitches to handling investor talks. And I
Hmm.
realized structure was the key. So, we built processes very early on.
Hmm.
And through it, one thing became clear, that transparency builds trust. When founders see that you are aligned with them and the investors see credibility, half the battles is won.
Hmm.
Now, every challenge taught me that something about, patience, adaptability, and the importance of staying founder first.
Hmm.
So,
Said.
this is what, kept me going as well. Plus, also, I had two little kids to manage
Hmm.
along with work. And that time, now my daughter is 21 and son is 19.
Hmm.
That time they were in 2014, back then they were really small.
Hmm.
And also my daughter had undergone a surgery.
Hmm.
So it was very difficult to, juggle between their schedule, work schedule.
Yeah.
And then, when COVID came in, uh, like I was kind of a little bit like at ease because I was at home with my kids.
Hmm.
I would just sit on a chair the
Hmm.
entire day and work, and while I could manage the
Well
kids as well.
said. Well said. So tell me, let's talk about Convanto now. How would you
Yeah.
describe the current mood and momentum in
Hmm.
India's startup ecosystem in 2025?
Um, See, if you walk into a cafe in Bangalore today,
Hmm.
chances are every second table someone is working on a pitch deck.
Hmm.
That's how, deeply entrepreneurship has become a part of our DNA.
Absolutely.
But, compared to the hyper optimism of 2021, today's vibe is more grounded.
Hmm.
Founders aren't chasing unicorn status anymore. They are, I think, chasing sustainability.
Hmm.
And I think we also have to thank Shark Tank somewhere,
Hmm.
because uh, though Shark Tank sometimes passes on the wrong message, but Shark Tank has also created a lot of entrepreneurship opportunities for
Correct.
many.
Correct.
And India's startup ecosystem has really matured.
Hmm.
We moved from growth at all costs to growth with sense. And investors now care about real numbers and not vanity metrics.
Hmm.
We have over 1.6 lakh registered startups
Hmm.
employing more than 16 lakh people.
Wow.
So we are the world's third largest startup ecosystem,
Hmm.
and that's something I feel is to be proud of.
Absolutely.
And though funding has dipped about 20% year on year, but
Hmm.
I don't call it a founder winter, I call it a funding detox.
Hmm.
The money is still there, but
Hmm.
it's just flowing, towards, stronger and more disciplined startups.
Very interesting. I love the
And
term funding detox. Very nice. So tell me, what are some of the sectors you believe that hold the strongest potential for growth in the next 5 years?
um, that's fun, because India is bursting with opportunity.
Hmm.
And I'd say first D2C and consumption, especially from smaller cities.
Hmm.
Consumers in tier two and tier three towns are now, they expect like a, what would I say it, variety and quality during driving the D2C market towards $60 billion by
Hmm.
2027.
Hmm.
So I think D2C is one sector. And next is like health tech. People are thinking about preventive care, diagnostics, mental wellness. So
Hmm.
the health tech market could cross over 50 billion by 2033.
Hmm.
Startups that, crack affordability and access will lead the way.
Hmm.
So I think health tech is definitely there.
Yeah.
Then agri-tech, half of India still depends on agriculture, but
Hmm.
it contributes less than 20% to the GDP.
Hmm.
Now that gap is massive. I think agri-tech, climate tech, and clean energy are also very exciting.
Hmm.
So I think renewable energy, EV infrastructure, waste management, carbon credits, these kind of deals are really
Very,
doing
very
well.
interesting. Very interesting. So,
Yeah,
you're telling me that you worked with over 400 startups and you
yeah,
must have seen thousands of pitch decks.
yeah.
What, in your view, are some of the recurring mistakes founders make?
Uh, this is a very good question. The biggest mistake is scaling before clarity.
Hmm.
Now, many founders try to go too soon, and they want bigger teams, they want to grow to big markets, before figuring out if their model is truly, profitable or not.
Hmm.
That's like, pouring water into a leaky bucket.
Correct.
And the second thing is
Hmm.
that hiring is too fast.
Yeah.
I've seen teams go from 10 people to 100 in months,
Hmm.
thinking it's progress, but
Hmm.
growth without, structure creates chaos, overlapping roles, no ownership, no
Hmm.
culture.
Hmm.
Then there is overspending.
Yeah.
Once funding comes in, some founders treat it like oxygen.
Hmm.
They burn cash on marketing, they burn cash on expansion without a long term plan.
Hmm. Hmm.
And also, some founders have bought a car with the investors' money.
I know.
They've also treated cancer. Uh, we have an example of Blue Smart, as you can see.
Correct, correct, correct. But tell
And
me, Vandana, there's also a lot of talk that is going on about the tremendous potential of tier two and tier three cities.
yeah,
You were just
yeah.
giving me the example of Bangalore, where every coffee cafe will have so many startup pitch decks being made. Tell me what is happening in tier two and tier three cities in our country.
So, if you really want to see where India's startup story is headed, you have
Hmm.
to look at beyond metros.
Hmm.
The next big wave is coming from tier two and tier three cities, places like Indore, Jaipur, Surat, Kochi,
Hmm.
Bhubaneswar.
Hmm.
And these cities are buzzing with ambition and access.
Hmm.
And also, it's because of cheap smartphones, reliable internet, and the UPI. Entrepreneurship has become truly democratic.
Hmm.
And half of India's new startups now have come from smaller cities,
Wow.
and they are not just copying metro models, they are
Hmm.
solving real, very local problems. Like if you look at Misho, which is empowered by small town entrepreneurs and homemakers,
Hmm.
which has built a community commerce model for price sensitive consumers.
Hmm.
So now, even like agri-tech startups from Punjab and Madhya Pradesh are creating tools for soil analysis,
Hmm.
logistics, and
Hmm.
yield predictions. Now, investors have started noticing this shift too.
Hmm.
Many venture funds that once looked at only Bangalore, Gurgaon, are now scouting for founders from Jaipur, Kochi, or Nagpur.
Hmm.
Plus running businesses in small cities is very cost effective.
Correct.
It's very low cost, like low rent, smaller teams, no financial, no longer like a, financial runway issue for them.
Hmm.
Like if you see, Gurgaon is very expensive. And that's the big advantage in a tight funding climate.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The cost of living in Gurgaon, and I.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, tell me, you also helped raise funds for many, many organizations, and your ranges from $1 to $100 million. What differentiates a fundable startup from all others?
Hmm, hmm. Honestly, the first thing I tell founders is not every great idea is fundable.
Correct.
Now, investors aren't just backing ideas, they
Mm,
are also backing people.
mm,
The founder's mindset matters a lot. Can you adapt when things go wrong? Can you pivot quickly? I have seen average ideas raise millions just because the founders were exceptional executors.
mm,
Now, then comes market size.
mm,
If your idea only impacts a few thousands of people, it's hard to attract large investment. And investors want scalable ideas that can reach millions.
mm,
And also, let's not forget, the unit economics.
mm,
Sometimes founders chase flashy traction, sorry, but ignore profitability.
mm.
And that never works in the long term.
Correct, correct.
Investors today look for, sustainability and not just like a short-term buzz.
Mm, mm. And how important is founder investor chemistry when you are looking at fundraising?
It's very, very important
Mm,
that the founder and investor chemistry it's like a marriage.
correct,
So to continue the marriage, that chemistry is very important.
correct.
And I think that builds with time. Um Also, founders have to understand that it is also the investors' hard-earned money that is
Mm,
going into their startup
yeah.
because they believe. So I think that needs to be used wisely,
Mm,
wherein investors also have to understand and that what are the problems that the founder is facing and how the investor can bridge that gap.
mm,
Like the investor can actually open their network for business and other stuff.
mm. Well said. What is your advice to founders struggling with valuation expectations given today's more cautious funding climate?
Uh, See, I'll tell you one thing that
Mm,
why always the founders are overvaluing themselves and investors are undervalued.
correct.
So this is the gap that we have to really figure out how to help both the founders and the investors.
Mm,
Now, the market has shifted. Investors are more cautious now, and valuations aren't as inflated as they used to be.
mm,
Uh, you know, uh, Now the investors also have a risk committee after many good startups and big ones have failed. Now,
mm,
the risk committee does a lot of analysis before
mm,
the investor can put in the money.
mm,
So, my first piece of advice is that don't take anything personally.
mm,
A lower valuation today doesn't mean your business is weaker, it
mm,
just reflects the current funding mood.
mm,
Apart from this, I think what many founders do is they box themselves in because of the valuation and they
mm,
leave no room for negotiation.
mm,
And they are not playing on the vision, on other stuff, which is more important, but they are only playing on the valuation.
mm,
So, global seed funding itself has dropped from 19 billion in 2022 to around 13 billion in 2024.
mm,
Instead of arguing over numbers, let's focus on solid traction, real customers, repeat revenue, and strong unit economics.
mm,
That builds credibility far faster than big valuation claims.
mm. Very good response. Thank you.
Thank you.
With so much international experience, Vandana, how do you compare investor behavior in Southeast Asia with India?
This is also a very, very interesting question because having worked in both the regions, I'd say the biggest difference lies in how investors think.
Mm,
Now, in India, early stage investors are very hands on.
correct.
They love to mentor founders, help build teams, shape strategies, and it's almost a collaborative process.
Mm,
And many Indian VCs actually see themselves as partners in the journey and
mm,
not just providing finances. Now, in Southeast Asia, especially in countries like Singapore, Indonesia, investors tend to be more metrics driven.
Hmm.
They want data, they want numbers, clear scalability before committing. And the conversations are more formal and structured and
Hmm.
data heavy. And sector preferences vary too. In
Hmm.
India, fintech, SaaS, D2C, health tech dominate because of massive domestic market. In Southeast Asia, it's more about logistics, mobility, uh, platforms that can
Hmm.
scale across countries.
Hmm.
And neither of the approach is better, but they are just different.
Hmm. Very interesting. Well, then I have time for two more questions for you.
Sure.
Do you think Indian regulations are keeping pace with the global flow of capital and innovation so that more capital can come in and life becomes easier for startups?
Um, See, I'd say India made great progress, but there's still a catching up to do.
Hmm.
Now the government has done a lot for the for startup India, like having grants, relaxed FDI rules, digital initiatives like UPI. So these are also studied by over 70 countries now, which says a lot.
Hmm.
But when it comes to capital flow, things are still getting complicated.
Hmm. Hmm.
uh, you know, uh, like for instance, taxation, and sometimes also, not having that room to move around. Like a recent survey showed that 40% of the global funds still, find India's compliance slower than Singapore or Dubai.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we have seen it like new age sectors like crypto, AI moves faster than policies. The intent is there, but the speed needs to match.
Hmm.
Like we have strong regulations for crypto, but if you see in Singapore, it's very easy to do crypto deals.
Hmm.
Now that said, initiatives like Gift City are a big step forward,
Hmm.
and it's making a cross-border fund registration easy and helping India to position itself as a financial hub.
Yeah.
But Gift City is also taking really long time to, stand tall, I would say, and it's
Hmm.
everything in Gift City is moving really slow.
Hmm. Well
So I
said.
think so. I think this is what is my take.
Absolutely. And my last question for you,
Yeah.
Vandana. Uh, Given the fact that we are such a big market and sometimes we can be bureaucratic, government can be slow, how can Indian startups attract more global investors and strategic partners? And what role can Convanto play to help them?
Uh, See, Indian startups are, see, we are already a global company
Correct.
and we work in over 45 countries.
Hmm.
Now, at times, we have been called by the Dubai government uh, and other countries as well to bridge this gap.
Hmm.
Uh, so I think what Convanto is doing is that we are positioning ourselves with global investors to
Hmm.
look at India with curiosity and look at it with confidence, and I think that will create a massive shift.
Hmm.
Now, this is what we have been doing in the long run, and now many of our investors they are investing in Indian companies
Hmm.
from Singapore, Dubai, UK, USA, and actually they call us and say we are only wanting to invest in Indian companies.
Very interesting. Very interesting. But on that note, Vandana, I just want to say what an amazing conversation this has been. Thank you for giving me your perspectives on the startup ecosystem, on the startups that we have in India, on what is really happening in tier two, tier three cities, and what are the opportunities that a lot of investors can look at in India because startups are very, very important for almost every young person in India. Thank you
Thank you.
again and good luck to you.
Thank you. Have a good day. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.